Well, the plot thickens. I mean, now I really want to see what's happened to Henry and Emily's marriage. I want to see if it lasted. I don't believe it did, and so I'm going to check the divorce records. D-I-V-O-R-C... Surname... Springett. There is one result within the catalogue. Covering the dates 1918, National Archive. Henry Roland Springett, Emily Springett, co-respondent Jack Burke. Who's Jack Burke? Is Jack Burke Emily's new... So, he filed for divorce in 1918, when the war was over. I've done a complete 180-degree U-turn on Henry. I started off thinking he was a bit of a bounder, and now I've got nothing but sympathy for him. The one who looks the naughty one now is my mum's nan, Emily.
Gregg is meeting Dr. Claire Langhammer, a senior lecturer in history, to find out more about Henry's divorce.
Last night I found out that Henry Springett, my great-grandfather, divorced his wife Emily in 1918. I was wondering whether you could throw any more light on it.
He didn't divorce her in 1918. In fact, actually, he doesn't divorce her at all. He starts divorce proceedings, but they're not completed. The petition is filed in 1918, but he actually starts the process in 1917. The reason for this is here. He's defined as a poor person.
He's not destitute, is...
No, he's not destitute, but he's got insufficient income to go through this procedure, and the court's made it very, very difficult to get a divorce. You could only actually get a divorce on the grounds of adultery. That was it.
But he never completed it?
He didn't complete it. Do you want to have a look and see the actual document? This is the most important bit.
Ooh. The said Emily Springett has frequently committed adultery with Jack Burke at 40 Francis Street, which is here, isn't it?
It is.
It's where we are.
Yeah. We think it was a naval boarding house just across the road from here.
That's not very discreet, is it?
It's not, and that might explain why the evidence was provided of these instances of adulterous behaviour.
Naughty Emily. Oh. Henry wants Grandad.
Yeah.
Henry wants custody of Wilfred. He didn't get it.
Well, because he doesn't turn up in 1922 when the case actually goes to court.
Why do you want custody of your child, but don't fight that little bit harder?
It could be financial, it could be that you just can't afford to come down to London, because until the 1920s, if you're having a divorce case that goes through the courts, you have to come to London.
My granddad probably never realised that actually his father wanted custody of him.
Absolutely. It wouldn't have been clear to him that his father was interested in him at all.
Also, there's another child. There's Vera, and Henry is not trying to get custody of both children.
No, he's not.
This confirms that Vera, my granddad's sister, is not Henry's child.
I think it probably does, or at least it confirms that he believed that to be the case.
Would Emily have felt any shame? Would there have been any social stigma with this?
Yes. Women certainly didn't want to be in the position of being labelled an adulteress. But lives were quite messy in that period. People would sort of, people tried to get by, didn't they? And I think for Emily, her husband's away for quite a period of time. She might have been looking for economic support, she might have been looking for emotional support, she might have actually been looking for sex. And people understood that having a husband who was away for long periods of time was difficult for all of those reasons.
I find it really hard to have any sympathy for Emily. I really do.
Well, I know that there are some parts of Emily's life which might explain some of her behaviour, or at least give you a different sense of her. She did have some difficult things that happened to her. If you want to look through this... now, this is a child that I don't think you know about, of the marriage.
June 1908. This is Valerie Springett, daughter of Emily Springett, and Henry Springett, stoker in the Royal Navy. Oh, this is a death certificate.
Yeah.
22 months old. Oh, crikey.
This is the first child.
OK. What happened?
She died of shock due to burns accidentally received through the upsetting of a paraffin lamp at the house.
My word.
22 months.
Oh, no.
So this is the child that was born exactly a year after they were married, the first child. This was actually, at the time, widely reported on in the locality. So here we have some further information. Here are two.
Fatal burns, child sad death at Devonport. Emily Springett, wife of a leading stoker, now serving on the Queen, went to bed at 10 o'clock. She had 2 children, both of whom slept with her in the same bed. She left a small... Who are the 2 children?
Well, the baby, Wilfred, who was born...
My granddad.
Mm.
She had 2 children, both of whom slept with her in the same bed. She left a small penny lamp burning on the table in order to enable her to feed her baby. It was her practice to let the light burn all night. The table on which it stood was a good way from the bed. Between 7 and 7:30 on Friday morning, she was awoke by the cries of the deceased, whom she found burning. Deceased was wearing a flat... Oh, dear. Oh, excuse me. It's really sad.
All right.
Crikey, how can this affect you? Didn't even know them. Just the thought of waking up, find your baby burning.
It's an awful, awful story.
The deceased was wearing a flannelette nightdress. The mother tried to extinguish the flames. The bed then caught fire and she couldn't put out the flames. Dr. Edgar Arthur Sherville, house surgeon, said the deceased was admitted suffering from extensive burns, practically covering the whole of the body. Deceased died within 2 hours of admission from shock. The case was a hopeless one from the first. It had been stated that it was the usual practice of a good many women who had young children to have a lamp burning in order to see and nurse the baby. If that were the practice, which he must say was a highly dangerous one, then they could not impute any blame to Mrs. Springett. Mrs. Springett did all she could and burnt her left hand. The jury returned the verdicts of accidental death. She watched her baby come in flames. That's really sad.
It is, isn't it?
Really, really sad.
Valerie was one of an estimated 1,400 children under 5 who died from burns and scalds in 1908.
I mean, the trauma of your child dying in such a horrible way. Emily would have had no counselling at all. She'd have felt terrible. Henry must have blamed her, and this sort of thing would tear any family apart. And it's tragic, and I don't really know how you get over it. And I suppose they didn't, really, did they?
No.
They didn't get over it. That's terrible.